Can if you maybe he could come say hi in a minute. But anyhow, yeah, so I think for this one, your work was all good on this one, Luke. It was just at the end when I think it's because the sign of the answer is based on the original form. So you can sort of when it's approaching infinity just think about like you did, right? Like this would really just become the highest degree is really all that matters, but you're right, it's a square root. So like 2x cubed over a negative x cubed, right?
Hmm.
And so I think, well, essentially this is going to become negative 2, right? From that mode of simplification. But what
Hmm.
you need to do is go back and just make sure sometimes to ensure that the signs are correct. And I think this would be correct because if I plug in a big positive here, it's going to be positive, right? And if I
Right.
plug in a big positive over here, it's going to be negative. So the sign seems to be correct to be negative 2. Was that the answer for that one?
Yeah, and for 24, it's
So 24 is a little bit different, right? Because let's do the exact same well, you simplify it the exact same way, right?
hmm
We would get 2x cubed. It's the exact same thing over negative x cubed, which simplifies to negative 2. But let's verify the sign. So if I plug in a big negative infinity, what happens up top? Well, the negative is to an even power, so that becomes positive, right?
hmm
But then in the denominator, I have a negative. And what happens when I put a negative to an odd power? A negative
it's
of, so it'd be positive. So actually, I have the correct value, but in the simplification process, it's because I took the square root to get a cube, um, that disregarded the fact that this actually would have been turned positive. You know what I mean?
hmm
So it's just sort of like that last step of verifying the sign. So I believe 24 probably told you positive too.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think that's all I would say for these is just take that last step to do sign verification. But everything else you were doing, like I've seen that process you did was quite good with like dividing by the highest degree term. I've seen that before. I kind of personally, it's sometimes hard for me to remember that. I just like, okay, well, let me just think about the highest degree term in each one, you know? And
Yeah,
so this would
yeah,
just be 1 over 1. But let me go back. Oh, plugging in positive infinity, so of course that would be positive over positive. It's
yeah. I
it's
prefer that process too, but
it's usually trickier when they give you like a negative infinity because then, for instance, if this were approaching negative infinity, the negative would have been filtered out here, right?
mhm.
Because it's being squared in the original form. So it would be a positive over a negative, and we didn't end up with that. So then we would be, okay, actually it's going to be approaching negative 1 because the value you already always find is correct, but sometimes in the simplification process you can end up changing the sign to a incorrect sign. Like, because
Right,
we lost the fact that it was being squared, right? When we just thought of that as x over x, essentially.
right, right.
So I would just say on those ones, just take a last step to go back to the original format and reconsider the sign, and then you'll be good to go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful.
All right, I'm gonna stop recording now.